Working with buyers from contact to contract will help you understand how to best use Bright tools to build lifelong relationships with the buyers that you're servicing. In this chapter of Working with Buyers from Contacts to Contracts, we'll talk about establishing your branding. So let's go ahead and take a look. So your branding is covered under your login name in the top right-hand corner of the screen. You'll want to click on Account and Settings, and coming down the page in the third row on the far right-hand side, let's click on MLS Settings. There are a couple of areas that are specific to your communication with your buyers, and that's what we're going to focus on here. So let's start by going to My Information at the top of the page, and you'll see there are a series of tabs in this area. Right now we're on the Information tab. This is going to bring over the information from the contact info. So if you do need to update any of this stuff that's in gray text, you'd want to start with your contact information to do that. But there are a few other fields in here that aren't contained in that section. And here you can override or update this information as desired. That covers things like your job title, your tagline or slogan, and URLs or addresses for social media that you might use as part of your business. If you do make any updates on this page, just make sure you hit Save in the bottom left before you move on. Next, we can add a header. If you haven't done so already, your header is going to appear at the top of the portal, and that's the online office space where you'll be communicating with your client. It looks like this as an example. So the header is the very top area of our page. So initially we can choose the image that's going to appear here in the background. You can either upload a custom banner image. So if you have a picture you've already taken, you can add it here. Otherwise, you can click on the link that says select a different banner image or theme. You can scroll through the available options until you see one you like the looks of. Click on it, and then in the bottom left, click Preview. This will show you an idea of what it's going to look like. If it's good, go ahead and move on. Otherwise, select a different banner image or theme and repeat your process. Next, we can choose whether or not to include a photo. You'll notice I've already done so my link says Change Photo. Once your photo is in there, you can toggle it on and off using the No Photo button, or include it by saying Use Custom Photo. Your link, if you haven't added a photo, will say Upload or Add Photo. You can click on it, browse from the device you're working on, and upload the image of your choice. The next area has to do with your individual branding, and the choices that you see here are controlled by what's in that Information tab that we were just on. So click on the drop-down arrow and select what elements that you'd like to have included in your contact info. And there is a blank line if you don't want to use that particular line. Finally, you can decide if you'd like to update the colors that are used in the text here. You can use the defaults, or there's a Use Custom Colors radio button. From this button, I can click on the individual color and then simply drag these little circles around until I have the color that I want to use. And you'll always see a preview right here on the page. Make sure you click Save before you move on. Next, let's update our email signature. This will be the default that's used on each email that we send through the system to our client. And it's really simple. If you already have an email signature set up elsewhere, you can just copy and paste directly in here. Otherwise, you can type in whatever text you'd like to include. Note that there is an option to include hyperlinks. Additionally, you can add photos. If you've already uploaded your agent photo, when you click Select Image, it'll appear as an option here for you to include. And that's an easy way to personalize your email signature a little further. If you do make updates, again, don't forget to hit the save before you move on. Finally, we have an option for a portal profile, and this is going to be a specific area within your client's portal, and it's the little area called My Agent. You have 4 separate sections to choose from. Clicking on the header is going to open that information for display. The first is contact information, where you can use the drop downs to include additional detail. It's almost like a little virtual business card within the system. Next, we have the portal greeting. This is a free-form text space where you can add a custom message. Next, we have an area for another video. You can include an address from a YouTube video as well as a title. And then an area for a larger photo. Once again, you can upload a separate photo or reuse perhaps the photo that you included before. If you'd like to change the order that these appear in, note that you can click on the icon, drag, and drop it into the order you'd like. You can also toggle on and off these options by using the check boxes that you see here. If you make any changes, don't forget to hit save in the bottom left.
In this chapter, we'll talk about adding your clients to your contacts in Bright. So if I have a buyer that I'm going to start working with, I'm going to want to go up to the Clients menu, come down to the first column under Email and Contacts. The Add button is located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and that'll open a pop-up where I can add all the details about this buyer. Clicking on Show All Fields will expand and show you all the options you have to include. The only required fields are those that are highlighted or shaded here in yellow. So I'll want to add a first name, a last name, and then some type of email address. There's lots of other fields that I can include as well, optionally. I can assign this buyer to my buyer category. And if you don't have categories already, you can click the Customize option and then add any that you'd care to have included here. Setting categories is an easy way to just cause a trigger or allow me to sort my contacts by what category or group they fall into. So there is a drop down here where you can choose your salutation, or you can either enter a custom salutation if you choose. If Lisa has an address, if I want to indicate if she's already been through the pre-approval process with a mortgage, I can add her home address, her business information, and set defaults when it comes to consumer notices. Usually you'd choose what state of listings you're going to send this particular buyer. I really like the section here at the bottom for notes because it's a great handy place for me to add notes from any conversations that I have with Lisa. And when it comes to buyers, I really like to start with getting them to talk through what it is that they're looking for. You may have heard the expression, buyers are liars. I don't think they're liars. I think they just, as they go through the process, they begin to really realize what they want versus what they need in a home. And market conditions like how much inventory is out there, what their budget is going to influence and help those wants and needs evolve. So if you introduce that idea to them, it's really going to help you both as you collaborate through this process together. But having this notes section really lets me make just reminders for myself about our conversation, what they're looking for. And I like to try to encourage people to think when they're considering wants versus needs, what are the things about the home that you can't change? We all know real estate is location, so asking those important questions up front. What are the important factors when it comes to location? Do they need to be within a certain neighborhood? Does the family need to stay in a specific school district? Is the size of the lot something that's really important to them? Maybe they have needs because they have animals or livestock, or those are the things that are really later are going to be difficult or impossible to change. There's a lot of other flexibility though when it comes to some factors in terms of maybe size of the structure or number of structures, things like that. So this note section can help you kind of organize this, and instead of living a life full of post-its, all of these things can be in one place. So I can add my details. In here and then revisit it whenever I need to. Do make note once you have your contact in here, if you ever need to go back and update, there is an edit contact option to make that easy to do. And having your contacts in here is going to create a connection when you start sending listings, so I can track what that client might be doing in the portal and really make it easy for us to communicate back and forth. In this chapter, we'll talk about using some of the affordability tools within Bright, which includes using some financial calculators and also including rate plug onto your reports for use in the client full with mortgage info display. So, something we all know that we should do when we begin working with buyers is get them pre-qualified as soon as possible. Now, I'm not a mortgage lender. I'm assuming you're not a mortgage broker. So you definitely want to, if possible, make some recommendations if they're not already working with a mortgage professional. Maybe your office or franchise has a recommended mortgage broker or brokers that you could refer them to. But in the meantime, if you're trying to get sort of an idea of what they can afford or help them understand, particularly if they're first-time home buyers, what the real costs associated with owning a home are, there are some quick calculators that you can use, of course with the disclaimer that this is not an official mortgage approval, located within Bright. And you can find these under Finance, Financial Calculators. And I'm looking at the top section here called Home Financing, and the one that's drawing my eye here is the one that says, how much mortgage might I qualify for? So clicking on that link, we're going to go to this financial calculator. And as you see, it's got some basic questions to help them understand what's involved in figuring this out. And there's some instructions up here at the top, as well as a note that says this calculator should be used for estimation purposes only. So while you're sitting down with your buyers or chatting on the phone for their first conversation, you can start asking them about things like their household income, their monthly expenses, how much they have saved to start. And I just have some arbitrary numbers thrown in here to give you an example. What they have saved, and then you should probably know roughly what the prevailing interest rates are. If they're looking at a 30-year loan, and other basic payment information. So knowing what insurance is roughly. Are they looking or considering homes with a condo association or a homeowners association? And what's the prevailing property tax rate in the area that they're looking? And then that'll give you a rough idea at the bottom. Hopefully the folks that you're working with have a rough idea of where their credit score lies. If they don't, there are tons of free sites that they can go to, apps even that they can use to determine that. And certainly their mortgage professional, as they get their approval, will give them an idea. But this is going to give you a rough idea based on this information, sort of a range of what they might be able to afford, and also sort of the payment that they might be looking at if they go for that. And I think that payment information is so valuable when you're working with buyers who, especially if maybe they're first-time home buyers or haven't purchased a home in this range before, just to give them an idea of what the monthly cost will be. The other tool that I might recommend that you use is called Rate Plug. And Rate Plug is a third-party site that we partner with at Bright, where you can go to rateplug.com, sign up, and if there are specific mortgage brokers or that either you or your franchise or company recommend, you can sign up, designate those, and it really is about adding a calculator to the bottom of a particular report within Bright that'll allow your clients to interact and get up-to-date information on what those interest rates are, what mortgage products are available. And the mortgage brokers that you designate are responsible for keeping that information updated. So the report I'm talking about is the client full with mortgage info. This is an example of what it looks like. And if we scroll down here to the bottom, you'll see an example of the mortgage calculator. So this shows based on the different types of loans they could use, what taxes are, homeowners association dues, insurance, and they can play with this and figure out based on what they think they would offer as a price, a down payment, and it'll calculate and show them what they'll end up in terms of a monthly payment with these different options.
In this chapter, we'll talk about familiarizing your buyer with the marketplace where they're looking to purchase. So a great tool in order to do this is to go up to market research and come down to the market performance report. And this is a report that's really going to help your buyer understand, based on the criteria that they've established, what is happening, how fast the market is moving, what inventory is out there, and who else might be looking for properties and are sort of the competition for the homes that are out there. So under the market performance report, the only required fields to fill in would be a price range, note that it's already in thousands, and then a geographic area. And you have your choice of searching by radius, by MLS area or county, school district, or by zip code. And then if further you'd like to narrow what returns, you can enter bedrooms, you can enter bathrooms, you can determine if you'd like to narrow by structure type and ownership interest. So I've already gone ahead and filled out some basic criteria for my sample buyer. I've given it a price range, I'm searching by school district, and by fee simple ownership interest. Notice there is a help button in the top right-hand corner if you have questions, and there's also some question marks next to the individual fields to give you some ideas of how to search. Once you've entered your criteria, in the bottom right, we're going to click Run Report. It's going to open your report in a separate tab, and we're looking at the market performance report. So let's talk about what you're going to be able to share with your client for the criteria. So it's giving us a rundown of what we chose to include, and based on that information, it's finding 12 active competitors. So those active competitors are the properties that are matching the criteria. And it breaks those out further to let you know how long those properties have been on the market so far. Coming down a little further, it's showing you for what it considers to be the same market period, which is the last 28 days, what statuses listings that meet that criteria have gone through. And it's breaking it out week by week for you. Next, it gives a competitive summary that's letting you know, on average, how many appointments those listings generally have before they go under contract. So they either go pending or active under contract. How many times those properties are favorited and how often they're sent out via mail. And it looks like our example here, it's a hot market. There's a lot of activity. So next appointment is showing us average appointments per listing, and this is calculating appointments that are set through showing time in the system. It's again breaking it out by week and giving us an average for the past month. So it's under 7 in terms of MLS appointment activity. That means it's not taking a lot of showings before those properties are already headed off the market. Next, we'll see the total agent scheduling appointments. And a good way to think about this is that there's generally one unique buyer to agent. So this is really kind of giving us an idea of how many other buyers out there are scheduling appointments for these properties. And it looks like there's 12 others in the past week for a total of 55 over the past 4 weeks. Next report is letting us know average appointments before contract versus days on market. So this is giving the average appointments, and then it's showing average closed price versus original price. So this is going to help us kind of inform our buyer about what they want to take into consideration if they find a property they like in terms of their offering strategy. So it looks like in the past week in particular, folks were getting pretty close to their original price. And our listing average days on market for the past week was about 51 days, which over the past 4 weeks was 56 days. So they want to go in with a stronger offer and they want to anticipate that properties are moving quickly. So those are the charts that I would primarily focus on. If you want, you can uncheck if maybe there are some of these that you don't want to include when you produce this report. Do note that you can print right from here, print to PDF, maybe attach to an email, and this is easily shared with your client to help them understand the market, because we really know that even if they're not a first-time home buyer, everyone's a first-time home buyer when the market is new. In this chapter, we'll discuss some search tips for setting up your search for your buyer and then also customizing the results for them. So I've already come into the search on the menu and I'm at residential sale. And when you first come in, you'll see the standard set of criteria are displaying on the screen. And I've taken the liberty of adding a couple of criteria for an example here. So we really want to think when we're setting up this search, what are those needs that our client expressed? And I really encourage buyer's agents when they're doing this to really keep an eye on the matches in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, because we want to make sure that our search is going to yield results. So I usually take sort of a less is best approach and really make sure that I'm going to get results, because if we add every single thing that our buyer potentially wants, we're really going to limit what comes in. So keep in mind when you're adding this criteria, maybe the search area is where you want to add the needs. And when we're looking at results, we can talk about adding detail that covers the wants. So school district was very important in my buyer's mind, so I've added that as my main criteria. I'm looking for active and coming soon properties. Coming soon is really where I can add a distinctive advantage to my client, because if they're searching Zillow or IDX sites, coming soon status listings don't appear on those unless they're manually entered there by a listing agent. So they're really going to get the most up-to-date data coming from me, which includes the coming soon status. I've gone with a price range, and I like to bump it out a little farther because we know with real estate there's always room for negotiation. So I'm going to bump my price out a little farther, and I'm going to go a little lower than they maybe would necessarily think, because I want to expand the possibilities of what's out there. So maybe if there's not a ton of inventory, I want to maybe include properties that they might consider a fixer-upper, knowing the market as I do. When it comes to beds and baths, I like to go with what they think the minimum is and then add a plus because most buyers are not going to complain if they know they need 3 bedrooms. If the property happens to have 4 or 5, not many people complain about extra space. And I like to use the total baths field as opposed to necessarily the full and the half because this field is going to take the sum of these. So it'll bring back any combination that equals the minimum. And then in my example, the folks I'm working with are considering bedrooms, and they really need a main level bedroom. They're kind of planning for the future. I've encouraged them to think what they might need maybe in the next 5 to 7 years, since National Association of Realtors tells us that's on average how often people are moving. So I want them to think about not just their needs right now, but also maybe what they might need a little farther down the line. And I've used the main level bedrooms field as opposed to the room level because that's again going to give me the opportunity to expand or have a little more inclusive search because this field's going to look for any bedroom, whether it's the master, bedroom 1, 2, 3, as long as it's on that main level. And I could certainly include any other features in here that might be important. I also want to encourage you not to overlook the map feature as a way to search. You have your radius tools, you can draw shapes, and you can do a drive time search if maybe somebody wants to be within a certain distance of their workplace or the kids' school, anything like that. You can also add this as part of your criteria. When I'm ready, I can move on to the results. On the results tab, you might want to include some of the things that your buyer listed as wants. So I can go up to my column heading. I can click and say insert column. And maybe they told me that parking was something that they were in particular interested in. So I'm just searching on parking. I'm selecting total garage and parking spaces and saying apply. It's not a deal breaker for them, but it's something that they'd love to have on their property. So I can come to the manage display. I can give this a name and I'll save as a copy. In this chapter, we'll cover creating an auto email for your client. So I've got my results in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Save menu at the bottom of the screen and click on New Auto Email. From the Contacts dropdown, if you've already added your contact, you can select them from the list. Otherwise, you'll want to use the link to create a new contact. You really want to have this contact associated with the auto email because that's going to make the full host of features available to your client through the portal. It's also going to give you the ability to collaborate fully with that client. You can carbon copy anyone else, keeping in mind that anyone who receives this link is going to have access to the same portal. So you'd really only want to copy someone who's maybe a spouse or part of the decision-making process or a secondary email, but only folks that are involved with this transaction. Next, we're going to add a subject, which will be the subject line of the emails that they receive from you. And it's also going to be one of the ways that you can identify this auto email later if you need to make an edit or a change. So I always recommend that your subject be a little bit more specific than just homes or listings or properties. Give it a little detail so that if you end up with more than one auto email for the same client, you can tell which is which. Next, we're going to have text for the very first email that they're going to receive, which is called the welcome email. And then there is a secondary tab, which is reoccurring email. So this will be what they get each subsequent time. Now I've already customized my message here. You can make yours say whatever you like. The default text does have a basic explanation of how to use the portal. You might want to include details about maybe expectations in terms of how you want to use the notes section to communicate, encouraging them to use the icons to organize and indicate how they feel about properties, anything that's specific to the relationship that you have with your client. Next, we have a signature in here, and that's because I've already set it up. There is a link to edit this if you need to, or actually create it if you haven't had an opportunity to do so yet. Next, we'll have the consumer notice. And remember, when I set up a contact earlier, I already indicated my preference for the state's consumer notice that this particular buyer is going to receive. You can always update it on the fly. I also previously set up what the salutation is going to be. So that's already set up through the contact as well. That's where we get the "Hi Lisa" that you see here, but you can edit that too if you need to. Next, it's reminding you of the criteria you're using, and you can determine what type of auto email you want this particular buyer to be set up as. One of our settings within here is the concierge feature. This is if you're working with a buyer who needs maybe a little bit more attention. Maybe their needs are fairly specific. Enabling concierge mode will assure that the listings come to you before you determine whether or not you want to have the client receive them. So it's creating kind of an extra step, but it's great if you want to offer white glove service. If you have a specific display that you would like your client to receive, you do have the option here through the additional link to designate that. So if you had created a custom report like I did for my client Lisa, I can select that. And then I know she's going to see the features that I've brought to the forefront by adding columns right away. You have any of these standard client displays will automatically be included, but if there's one in particular that you want to make sure they get, that's where you would include it. Next, if I'm having my auto email go out directly to the client, I'm going to go ahead and choose the schedule that I want them to receive notifications on. ASAP means that as soon as a new listing hits the market, a price change happens to an existing listing, or it becomes back to active. So it had maybe a status change where it went under contract and then that fell through and it went back to active. The ASAP will send one email notification per listing. So it might be more email than they're used to receiving, but it does make sure that you get out ahead of the Zillows, the Trulias, the Realtor.coms, and those third-party sites. You also have the option for daily, and you can choose the days of the week, morning, evening, or both. It will only send notifications when new listings, price changes, status changes happen. So they'll still get all the listings. It's just going to send sort of a batch email. So one email at the time you sent that has all of the changes listed in it. And then there's a monthly option as well. Make your selection and go ahead and click Save. So let's pause for a minute and go back to this idea of concierge. If I check off Enable Concierge Mode, I have the option to receive notifications via email, and that's an ASAP option. So one notification per new listing, price change, or status change. Whether or not you choose the alert notifications via email, if you do have new matches to review, you will get an alert in the top left-hand corner of your screen to let you know that you have things to check out whenever you're live in the system. So it's really just a matter of preference if you want to get those emails too. Now, if I choose the concierge mode, you'll notice my schedule has disappeared because, again, I'm going to get the notifications instead of the client. When I say save, it's going to take me over to the approvals screen. So here are the 4 properties that are matches, and it's going to let me know whether I sent these previously or not. That's the emailed column that you see here. This is a really great tool for managing what's been sent to a client and sort of the listings that are coming up as a match for their information. Now, it's showing me, because I selected the specific custom report that I designated for this buyer, the one line that meets that. There's a couple other fields on here that I just want to mention, and they're also here to help you manage the listings so that you understand what's been sent and make a real informed decision about whether or not to send that again. So the column right here beside email to the left is a little folder. And if my client has seen those listings previously in their portal and used the icons to designate it's a favorite, it's a possibility, it's a discard, I would see that icon here because that might inform my decision about whether or not I send it to them again. Um, I will also see the Post-it note icon. And if you're never sure what an icon does, if you hover over it, it's going to give you information about it. So if I click on that Post-it, it's letting me know, click to open, close listing notes. And if your client is using the notes feature in the portal, they might have said, hey, I love the backyard, or this one's a little bit expensive for what it is. So I'll be able to see that and again decide whether or not to send the listing on. I can also choose to add my own notes. So I maybe want to highlight that this property has 2 parking spaces, just like you wanted, to the client, and I can click add note. And then when I send this listing on, it's already going to have a little note from me included within it as a tool that I can use, which is really great. Once you've sent this on to a client and they've opened the first email that you've sent and gone into the portal, you're going to see an additional box down here where you can add notes. Now, when I decide, hey, I'm ready to send a couple of these along, I can tag them or select them and then say approve selected. And when I say approve selected, off they go to the client. Alternatively, I might look at them and say, you know what? These 2 are not a good fit, so I'm not going to send them on. So I'll reject these. One of the things I really love about this concierge feature is it helps me organize, but I don't lose anything that I've worked with. So if, I'm working with Lisa for a few weeks and we begin to realize that the market is just really tight for her desired criteria, for her budget, there's just not a lot of inventory. So I might go back later on and decide I want to see properties that I rejected previously because there just isn't a lot to choose from. So I could go back and click on the Show to Rejected, review these, and maybe as Lisa's needs change and evolve, I realize these are now a good fit. So I could tag them and then send them along to Lisa. So in this chapter, we'll discuss collaborating with your client. So one of the things I like to recommend buyer's agents do, if you haven't already, is set yourself up with a sample auto email. Send it to a personal email address that you have, and then you really fully get to immerse yourself in the experience that your client is going to have. In front of us, I have the example of an email where I've done just that. I have a regular auto email that I'm sending to my personal email address, so I can see what my client sees. So here I have my salutation, the body of the message, this is a reoccurring message, and then a sample of the new listings that match my client's criteria. So here at the top, I get to see in green why this listing is being sent. This listing is a back to active listing, and I can see that through active. I can also see that there's a new listing. Actually, as I scroll down, there are several new listings. I can also see price changes, like this one that I've received previously has had a price increase. So it's coming up again because there's something triggering it as new. Scrolling down on this particular email, we'll also see the link to access the portal and an email signature. At the very bottom is a link where if they need to learn how to use the portal, when they click that link, it'll open a video that's geared right for them. And the next chapter in this series will show you that video, which I really encourage you to watch if you've never seen before, because you might learn a thing or two about what your client can do in the portal. Now, the client should know, and you should encourage them to use the link to actually view the listings in the portal. They don't want to just skim details that they see in this. This is really just to kind of pique their interest. They actually do want to click the link and get into the portal itself because that's where they see the full functionality. That's what keeps the portal sending to them. That's what keeps them subscribed to your auto email. So if you haven't set expectations with your client, make sure that they know what to do here, how to get into the portal itself, and all the cool things that they can do there. So, your collaboration with your client can really be found mostly under the clients menu. If I need to reference email that has gone out to them, I can go back to the send email. If I want to see exactly what's happening with them individually on a contact level, I can go to the contacts, and that's the screen we're looking at here. Here I can see when they've last visited the portal itself. Never means that they might just be accessing the email that's going out to them. Remember to be careful with that. You want to have a conversation with them and make sure they know they need to actually go into the portal in order to continue to receive the auto email. Right here in the next icons, the post-it note are notes that they are adding. The heart are favorites that they're setting. Light bulbs are possibilities, and the little recycle bin are discards, properties that they're indicating that aren't a good fit for them. If I want to see the individual properties involved or the notes, I can click on the number under that specific column in order to see them. Anytime you see a bold number or an asterisk under the notes, it means it's one that I haven't looked at previously. And again, I can click on it to get a closer look. This will just show me the most recent notes. If you click on that number and you see there are multiples, this is also holding the historical record of notes. So it'll show you the listing that the note was added on. I can click on that individual item, see my conversation, see their conversation, and I can actually reply from here as well. So if I want to type a quick response back to that client, I can absolutely do so. When I add the note, they're actually going to get a separate email with the content of my current message to them. So there are other things that you can do in here as well. If I click on the drop down arrow for this specific client, and let's use this one as an example, it's really breaking out all the different things the client might be doing. Portal activity, so when they've been in there, what they've been doing. Portal searches, which are searches they've created themselves. The auto emails that I have set up for them. Consumer notices that they've acknowledged or received. Saved searches, and then CMAs I may have created, and again, sent email. One of the really cool features that you can do in here, if your client does have a particular question, is use the link to open a portal. And what you're doing is opening a carbon copy of what they see. You can also, if you need to send them a message or maybe send them a link to something, there's an attach a link feature that will actually open a specific form for them so you can email them something. Last tip I'll mention here is setting up your portal notification settings. So I'm under my login name, account and settings. I'm going to come down to the third row, last column, MLS settings, and all the way at the bottom of the MLS settings are your portal notification settings. And here we can designate what actions our contact may do within the portal and how we would like the system to notify us. So your choices are to get an immediate email, and it would be one email per action, an immediate text, one text per action, or a daily summary email. So just once a day, we would let you know all the different actions that happened. So you can pick as many of these as apply. I will just encourage you to fill out the information at the bottom to edit your cellular information if you're asking for a text. You need to do that in order for it to work. And then make sure you hit save. In this chapter, we'll cover using showing time to schedule showings for your buyer. So I'm looking at a list of results, and my buyers let me know that they'd like to see several of them. So I've already selected them, and I'm going to go down to the floating action toolbar and click Showing Time. Showing Time will open as a separate tab. I'm going to click Add to Showing Cards, pick the date that we'd like to go see our listings, can associate this with a buyer if I'd like, but I'm just going to add a description. Say OK. And now it's going to bring in the listings that I selected and begin plotting them on the map for me. If I want to change the order, I can absolutely go ahead and highlight this individual property and then drag it and drop it where I want it to be. Or I could change the number and click update in order to get these guys in the order that I'd like to see them in. One of the other nice features included in here is I can click the button that says Smart Route, and it's going to determine what the system here feels is the best way to drive to reach these. Additionally, I can click the turn-by-turn directions and have my route all plotted out for me. If I need to add a listing stop, I can go ahead and type or search for the listing by MLS number if that listing doesn't happen to already be set up in showing time. That allows me to include it on my itinerary just so that it's a notation, though obviously you'd follow the instructions in the listing to call a showing center or do whatever else it is that it's asking for. If I need to add another stop, there's an Add Other Stop option. This allows me to add maybe the place that I'm going to meet the client the morning of the showings, or maybe where we're going to stop to have a coffee midway through, and again, have that included on the itinerary itself. I would just add the actual address of the property and click the Add Stop button. So once we have these items added in, the times are going to allow me to help figure out my day a little better. So let's say we're meeting the client at our first stop at 10 a.m. So I could click on 10 a.m., confirm the times, both the start time, and I probably don't need 2 hours for the showing. I maybe want to put in a window of 30 minutes. And if there are any other listing notes, I could add them in there. And once I'm ready, I would go ahead and say save. Now, I can start laying this out and nothing is being sent until I hit the send request button. So I can say, oh, I think we're going to spend a half an hour there. It's about 17 minutes to the next stop. Let me give us a buffer of a few minutes. So maybe I'm going to make the next appointment at 11 a.m., so forth and so on. So once I have these all laid out, again, I would hit send requests to get them off to the various listing agents that are included in here. When I'm ready to share this with my client, there's an area for notes. If I have any additional instructions or reminders I want to give, bring your walking shoes, whatever. I can click the little envelope icon to email the tour details or the printer icon to print it off and send it to them. If I at any time need to check back on what I've set up, all of your showing time information lives under the clients, showings, my showings area. I have a little dashboard in here where you can take a look at the showings you've requested for today, tomorrow, beyond, and there'll be links for the ones that haven't been confirmed versus those that have been confirmed if you need to see those at a glance. You can also find them under the showing section. This is sort of a calendar view, and you can go ahead and look at the ones you've requested. There's a link to go over to review those if there's anything that you need to check. You can also use the filtering options to do that down below. So in this chapter, we'll talk about creating buyer's closing costs for your buyer. So your buyer's excited. They found a property that they think they might be interested in putting an offer on. How do you prepare them for the costs that are involved? Well, if you have the listing sitting in front of you, you could come to the B $ icon. When you hover over it, it says buyer closing cost. And when you click on it, it's going to open a separate tab with the buyer estimated closing cost sheet. Now, because we came directly from a listing, it's already knowing the property that you're talking about, so it started auto-filling the details from the MLS sheet and also from the public records. You can also access the buyer closing costs under the finance menu, buyer closing costs. And that's going to allow you to start with a blank slate. You can always use the autofill from address form to search for the address of the property, or if you have the listing ID or MLS number handy, you can pop that in and use that to search as well. The required fields are indicated over here on the left, though I would encourage you to fill out as much information as you have. You'll need to include an estimated settlement date in order for the calculator to do some estimations with regard to prorating taxes. We'll also want to fill in the interest rate. And then if they're going to ask for any seller's assist, you can fill in those additional details as well. And you really just kind of want to walk through the form itself. There are tons of fields included in here, but again, the only required ones are indicated over here on the left with the red word required and the asterisk. So coming down the page, you'll want to fill in what type of mortgage they're going to be using. And you'll see that'll shift the fields that are included. Mortgage insurance, origination fees, other closing costs. If you have this information, it's great to include it because it'll let you be really detailed, really specific with your buyer. But again, it's not required. So if you prefer to be a little more loose with the information, especially if this is just an early stage where you're giving them an idea of what their potential costs would be, their payments, etc., you don't necessarily have to fill it all in. But here's our information that was prorated for us. Over here on the right-hand column, you'll see that as you add or change information, it'll change on the fly with you. And our ending numbers are our estimated cash needed to purchase and our estimated cash needed at settlement. When you're ready to share this with the client, you can do so by clicking the email button or the print. If you're somebody who uses maybe a dot loop or another product where you obtain electronic signatures, when you select print from the preview tab, you'll see that there'll be an option under destination where you can save as PDF. That's the default for me, but if you click the change button here, it'll let you choose that as an option if it's not the default for you. I'll also mention that you can save this in case you think you might be doing a couple of these or you just want to have it for posterity. You can associate it with an individual contact if you'd like to do so. I can add this to my contact Lisa, or I can just name this and I can indicate some way that I'll remember it later and save it. If I need to reference this later, you would use the load button in order to load this again. Here's the one that I just saved. I would click View Edit in order to load that information. In this chapter, we'll talk about editing your auto email or your contact as needed. So first, let's start with editing your auto email. I'm under Clients, Auto Email, and here on the top is the auto email that I'd like to edit. In order to do so, I'm going to use the drop down beside the name of the auto email. And here I can determine then what it is that I want to edit. If it's the criteria, maybe my client has changed their mind and would like to expand the price range that they're willing to look at. Maybe they've decided to nudge their price up a bit, so I can update that information and click Save. Automatically, then it'll prompt me to go to the settings for this auto email, and maybe I might want to make a note and say something, maybe in the welcome email, the reoccurring email, with regard to what I changed. Like, hey Lisa, I upped the price like we talked about. If I want to, I can just make that change and go ahead and click Save. Now, if instead what I want to change with regard to the auto email are the settings themselves, independent of that criteria, I can always come into Clients Auto Email and go straight to the settings. And here I can update anything from the body of the email itself. I can change this out of concierge mode if maybe I wanted to start sending directly to the client. Maybe we've got past the point where I need to look through all of the email itself. I can make that updated. I can also go ahead and change the schedule on which the client is receiving the email. And I'll often recommend after you've already sold to someone, you might want to change the auto email to a monthly auto email. And maybe you want to tweak the criteria to the neighborhood or properties very similar to the one that they're choosing to purchase or have purchased. That way you're not losing touch with this client, and you can kind of update the text of your message to let them know that you're still available for referrals or any questions they have with regard to real estate, and that you're keeping them abreast of the property values in the neighborhood and with similar properties. That's a great way to stay in touch. You also might want to disable an email, and you can do that as well through the settings section. And the reason you might want to disable an auto email is if the client is getting serious about putting an offer in on a property. It's kind of like searching for a car or a wedding dress. Once you pick one, you don't keep looking. You really want to focus on the one that they've selected. So disabling the auto email is going to keep all their criteria in place just in case their offer isn't accepted, but it stops that process of you getting notifications or them getting notifications or both. So I don't recommend deleting the auto email until you've been through settlement and it's a done deal. And even then, you might not want to. You might want to just edit it, as I previously mentioned, but you can go ahead and disable it. You could also do that from out here on the outside. You would just tag, and then there is a disable button here that allows you to do that. So that's making edits to the auto email. If it's the contact itself, you can always come back to Clients, Contacts. If I click on the drop-down arrow for my client, I can go ahead and say Edit Contacts. And here I can make any necessary changes, like maybe Lisa got a new email address or has asked me to start copying her work email. I could just add a comma and add the new email address. Or maybe Lisa has purchased, so I want to move her out of buyers, and maybe I want to move her to like a past buyer or past client list so that I make sure she's on my list to send out holiday cards or change of season greetings. Don't want to lose those past contacts. We're hoping that they're going to be our raving fans and potential for a great deal of more referrals and hopefully repeat business.